Good evening, everyone. We're going to start the January 22nd, 2024 committee meeting of the Fairfield RTM. Can we all stand for the pledge? Thank you. Next week, the state of the town and the lease report will be presented at a regular meeting. Right now, we'll move on to presentation order 3, which is agenda item 4. Is Fire Marshal Higgins here? Yes, thank you. If you come on up and just give us a little report about the blight. You have to push the button at the bottom there, and you have to hold it the entire time. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. How are you? Thank you very much for having me, Phil Higgins, Fire Marshal. And little did I know 5 years ago when I became the Fire Marshal that I also held the position of Blight Prevention Officer. So this is our annual report. For those that are new to the RTM, welcome. For those that have been here, nice seeing you again. A little about blight. We look at unfit structures, structures that are dilapidating, falling down, broken windows, tiles, roofing, anything that could be a menace to public safety. So once we receive a complaint, a signed complaint, it's our duty to go out and do a formal inspection. And then if we find that it is determined to be blight, we send the owner of the property a determination letter and request them to come in for a hearing. At that hearing, it's our responsibility to kind of formulate a plan that they correct the matters within 30 days. If such matters aren't resolved in the 30-day window, then we can move, we can actually have the authority to move to fines. Once we go to fines, it's $100 a day until they're resolved. So if you have, does everyone have this report here? Okay, one of the things that I like about this is if you notice the amount of complaints that we received 48 last year. Of those 48, we've resolved 34 almost immediately. They were closed. Whether that was our inspections we determined that the property did not meet the definition of blight, or we worked with the homeowner or property owner to resolve those issues relatively quickly. Moving along, we had 19 hearings. That just means that a subject was brought in. Again, we've discussed the matters and determined blight or determined that they were not blight. 16 were determined to be blight. 1 was determined to be condemnable, but that was back in 2020. And of that, only 7 have been fined, and we currently have 3 that are still accruing and 6 that have yet to be resolved. Any questions in regards to that?
Thank you, Fire Marshal Higgins. Are there any questions for him? Representative McCabe.
Good evening through you, Madam Moderator. Thank you so much for coming and I'm kind of blight obsessed, so forgive me. I might have a few questions. Michelle McCabe, District 4. First question is, of these properties, how many of them are commercial properties or mixed use?
Okay. Looking at this, I only believe that 1, 2, 3, as mentioned here, the AT&T building on Stilson Road, which was, to be honest with, was not determined to be blight. Okay, that was just an inspection. The Joe's American at 750 Post Road was commercial, as well as the Handy and Harmon property on Grassmere was commercial.
Thank you. Second question, I'm just curious, there were some new amendments to the state statute that were passed last session, and some of them open up more opportunities for repeat offenders to be able to bypass some processes and fine at higher levels. I was just curious, do you have many properties where there are multiple violations?
No, not yet. That's a good thing. We just had one that had been removed a while back, and we just received a new complaint on the property, but it was inspected today, because we just actually had our meeting today, third Monday of the month, and we'll be looking into that. But today's complaint was more, I believe, of a zoning matter than blight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? If there's anyone online that has a question, put it in the chat. Representative Bastilli?
Sharon Bastilli, District 5. I think it's 230 Tuckahoe is no longer in my district, but was in my district for 2 terms. And I think that that's a house that's been vacant since the mid-70s. I just wanted to check in on the status of that. And also, I believe the owner of that property owned several properties throughout Fairfield in a similar situation.
That is
Can you
correct.
elaborate?
Absolutely. So I believe it's 280 Tuckahoe. 280 Tuckahoe had been vacant for a very long time. And you're correct. Same owner as some other properties that have been brought to blight condemnation in the past as well. That property has been removed due to a possible buyer who's under contract right now, who has fixed the property to our liking. That has now moved on to the town attorney in regards to collection of fines and/or a lien.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Havey?
Thank you, Lisa Havey, District 9. Used to be 6. The house in question is still is now a 9 with me. I'm talking about 92 Grasmere Avenue. I believe it's the same owner. And I noticed the property has been cleaned up, but the house is falling down. Can you please tell where that is in the loop?
Absolutely. Thank you again in regards to that. Same owner is 280 Tuckahoe. So that is also, I believe, under possible contract for a new buyer. The property has been cleaned up. The building is still in a state of disrepair. We are looking right now, we are working with the possible buyer to make the building structurally sound. I believe they had to go get an A2 survey before moving forward. I am planning on tomorrow getting in touch with this possible buyer and totally securing the property with a new construction style fence as well.
Are these the same buyers?
Yes, they are.
This owner has several other properties. Are all the properties in the same condition with a possible buyer?
No, they are not.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none here or in the chat. Thank you, Fire Marshal Higgins. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Well, have a good night.
You too. We're going to move on to presentation order 4, agenda item 5. Police Chief Calamaris is here to present to us regarding the recovery of costs related to properties with breaches of peace, public disturbances, and disorderly conduct. You can go ahead and just give us a little presentation, and then we'll ask for questions.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. So the recovery of costs is related to any kind of disturbance that we respond to down at the beach. Oftentimes when we have disturbances, I shouldn't say just down at the beach, because we've used these approaches in these town ordinances for other areas. If you could remember the hookah lounge that was closed down not too long ago, we used those under those circumstances as well. In most cases, it comes down to tenants with renting houses down in the beach area. In this particular year, we have 4 violators, one at 505 Fairfield Beach Road, one at 1197 Fairfield Beach Road, one at 2131 Fairfield Beach Road, and one at 701B. Just for some background, we send out a warning letter on the first offense, making them aware that the landlords are responsible for the costs of services and resources that we expend to send them down. when they get charged with creating a public disturbance. Oftentimes, the landlords then have language in their lease agreements that put that burden back on the tenant. So oftentimes the money is paid from the tenant that currently lives in the housing. As of this year, a total of $407.82 was collected, and in comparison to last year, it was $287.20.
Thank you, Chief Calamars. Any questions for Chief Representative Georgiadis?
Hi, Chief Drew Georgiadis, District 9, hotbed for these kind of issues. Thank you very much for following up on this. I had worked with your predecessor, Chief Liddy, to pass this ordinance, the recovery of cost ordinance, that does ultimately put the burden on the landlord, even if the tenants move out after 9 months and don't pay. My question is, since we passed the new noise ordinance, each noise violation is supposed to generate $100 in fines. I've looked over the beach report since August, and it doesn't ever seem to say that a fine was issued. Half the time, it'll say noise complaint, but I can never figure out if the fine, which goes directly to the town, positively impacts the balance sheet for the town, is ever issued. Can you address that? And $400 would only be for noise ordinances, violations of $100. And from when you said the last year, do you mean the fiscal year or the calendar year?
This goes on calendar year, so
So you're saying since January, there've only been 4 noise ordinances that have been issued fines? Because the $100 fine was around before we updated the noise ordinance. That seems as if we're not collecting the money, and money's always good. Can you address that, please?
sure. So in 4 cases, we used the charge of 53A 181, creating a public disturbance. And in all of those cases, there would have to be 2 responses to the residents before we could start charging for the recovery of funds. So,
Could you explain that, 2 responses to the residences?
sure. So initially, we issue a letter that says notice and warning. This is the first attempt. Persons on property owned by you were issued an infraction by the Fairfield Police Department for creating a public disturbance. The infraction was issued to, enter name. Should there be any further violations at this address, you may be required to pay the reasonable costs necessarily incurred by the town of Fairfield for the return of law enforcement officers to the location, your property, which leads to an arrest or citation.
Does
In-
this have to be the same person or just the residents?
The residents. Because ultimately it puts the burden on the landlord who is the owner of the property. So if we arrive on day 1 and we see Joe Smith, and then we arrive day 2 and we see, Jane Doe, then the burden goes on the landlord of the property or the property in and of itself.
So you're saying that all these noise ordinances that I read about every 2 weeks in the beach review, none of them have subsequent violations, so that's why the fines don't reflect the number of violations that I see in the beach report?
I'd have to confirm with the beach report in front of me, which I don't have, but I'll make an assumption and say that that is correct. In most cases, we are not responding to the same house twice. In most cases, generally speaking.
Do you think the fine is effective
The
as a
recovery,
deterrence?
It's dependent. It's dependent. Like we have one frequent flyer. The house is passed on to the same students involved in certain activities, and we often go there every year for the same activities, just different group of kids.
I was just curious. My son went to the College of Charleston, and they had a $1,200 fine that could be, put on each residence the first time. So you could get $3,600 in a day. It was a good deal for the town. Slightly different than the $100 on the second or third infraction. But you said on the second infraction, they receive a fine.
On the second response for a similar violation, we would send a letter to the landlord, and then oftentimes the landlord passes that on to the tenant. But we send the letter to the landlord, who are ultimately responsible for paying that services.
So with the second infraction, they are fined.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just going back to people online, if you're not speaking, you can put yourself on mute. That would be wonderful. Just make sure you're muted. I know there's some background noise. Representative Zezima.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Liz Esma, District 4. Good evening, Chief. Thanks for being here. So the backup is a little bit disjointed, so I wanted to confirm a couple of things with you. The last news report I saw about SantaCon and police response indicated that there were 2 summons for disorderly conduct. Now, I believe the event was the 9th of December, and the only line item I see here for December of 2023 is on the 16th. Can you indicate whether or not that is related to this incident? And if not, why would those not appear here?
Because these are only the recovery of funds. So if we responded to that house on 2 occasions for arrestable offenses, and we also issued a warning in writing with return receipt requested, then the landlord would be issued the second offense, and the monies from that is the recovery of those funds for our police services. And if you'd like, I can give you an example of a scenario where what we would charge a landlord for. So for example, excuse me, we charged a half hour for law enforcement services for Officer Falbo on scene dispersing a crowd. $40 an hour, which is an estimate. He was there for a half hour for that particular event. And then charged another half hour law enforcement services for case preparation at $80, which equals $40 because it was only a half hour. And then 1 hour for the court liaison officer for case preparation and transporting documentation to court. And that was $41.40. Oftentimes, we look into our case management system to determine how long the officer was writing the report, how long they were on scene at that particular location, and that often guides us to get an estimate of the required services that were necessary at that particular location.
Okay, thank you. So if an incident yielded summons or arrests that are not related to a particular address, which may happen if you're dealing with public on the beach, and then we'll learn a lot more about this tomorrow night, but so there's another report that we would be able to see.
That's correct. That would be the arrest report related to that incident.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Esterita.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Ken Esterita, District 1. I think I may be doubling back on some of the line of questioning here, but I just want to make sure that I understand. So I'm not interested in this as a revenue generator for the town, but I am interested in it as driving a change in behavior, particularly in the problem areas down by the beach. So if I'm looking at this correctly, if I'm understanding what you're saying, Chief, so there have been 4 instances where we have collected fines from a residence based on the disturbing the peace ordinance?
Repeat that question.
So based on what I'm looking at on the chart here, there have been 4 or 5 instances where we've collected fines based on the residents, in essence, being charged with disturbing the peace. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, how is probably a better way to interpret it is that law enforcement services or resources responded to a location in which an arrest was made. And in all of these cases, that residence is owned by a landlord and not occupied by that landlord.
Okay, so in these instances, an arrest was made in every circumstance. Okay. So my next question is, in light of the noise ordinance that was just passed, have citations been written for individuals in the beach area, and would that show up on this report here if money was collected?
That would not show up in this report. It's dependent on each individual
Yeah.
circumstance. So for example, if we had an individual that was charged with creating a public disturbance who was walking down Fairfield Beach Road and he or she chose to plead not guilty on the case, that case would be open and pending for a period of time in the judicial system outside of, but the infraction was issued and the recovery of costs are dependent on how that case, I guess, vets out in court.
Yeah. So I'm making an assumption here, but I want to make sure that I'm making a correct assumption, because I look at this and I hear like all the complaints with everything going down in the beach area, particularly as it relates to, SantaCon last month. And I only see 5 instances here. I'm like, that it seems kind of low. And not that, I'm advocating, busting every college kid that's walking down Fairfield Beach Road. But I just want to make sure that you're using the tools at your disposal to enforce public disturbance, noise ordinances, and all that kind of stuff.
It is, and this list or the list from last year is not reflective of our enforcement activities at the beach. Those are completely separate and apart. This is if we respond to a certain location on several occasions and issue enforcement action at those certain locations. And if we just take a moment to get away from the beach area, we use this significantly at the Hookah Lounge, which is just up the street a couple of years back, where we had some very serious quality of life issues that were occurring all hours of the night. And this was a way for us to charge the tenant and landlord for the persistent use of police resources.
Okay. All right. I think I get it now. Thank you. And thanks for everything for you and your folks do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Kuhn.
Representative Keene, District 7. So just so I understand it, that $400 and change recovery of costs, that's not fines, right? That's police time to prepare to go back and paperwork, or even the actual physical going there and the $80 an hour prorated for whatever it is. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so we're conflating a couple of different things in some of these conversations when we're talking about $400 as the total of fines for excessive sound or disorderly conduct or whatever it may be.
That's completely different.
Okay, yeah, great, thank you.
Representative Volk.
Representative Jay Walk from District 5. Hi, Chief. So some of us on this body voted, I think last term or the term before, about, remember we voted on, and we approved, which I was greatly appreciated, the noise, like if the alarm system goes off, there's a fine. Is it the first time it's a warning and then the second time is not? Is that, Chief, under noise also? I mean, is that would be the same like this is go into the home and then first one would be a warning?
No, the alarm ordinance is a little bit different because oftentimes we have power failures, weather-related incidents, people's animals in their homes. We kind of have a 3 strikes rule with home alarms. So if an officer responds to the house by the 4th time, you'd get an additional fee. You'd get a fee for the service of the alarms at your house.
So there is you get there is a fine if it's excessive. Well, it happened to me too with pets. So thanks. Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions for Chief Kalmars? Seeing none here or online. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you all.
Thank you. We're going to move on to presentation order 5, agenda order 6 and 14. We have Carolyn Trabucco here from the JRIB, or the Joint Retirement Investment Board. Carolyn, if you could give us the report first, we'll start with that.
Well, hey, everyone, thanks. And thanks for doing both of mine at the same time.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. So I will keep it brief. And I'm Carolyn, I'm chair of the JRIB. What I'd like to do is I'll point in your direction. In the packet, you have the September quarterly report that we received from our OCIO Vanguard. I'm not going to go through that whole report. You can breathe a nice sigh of relief on that. It's a pretty voluminous report. So, but I do think it's important that you have an opportunity to see the type of work that we receive at the JRIB at our quarterly meetings, and the type of work that we review. What I'd like to do is briefly kind of talk about our most recent quarterly performance, which is reflected in that report, which is the September of 2023 quarter. We'll talk about pension, we'll talk about OPEB. Then I'll fill you in on some administrative updates, and I'll bring you up to speed on some current events happening at JRIB, because JRIB is pretty exciting this month. The pages I'll be referring to in the packet, should you choose to follow along, the pension data is on your packet pages 29 and 30, and the OPEB are on pages 60 and 61. So let's talk for a second about JRIB. So for those of you who aren't familiar, kind of where we fit, the town's pensions sit a little bit outside of the town, and they're managed independently. They represent a liability for the town. The pensions receive their own separate credit rating by the 3 different ratings agencies. The current credit rating of our pensions is a AA. And has been for some time. We're an over 85% funded pension. A couple of years back, we were a little higher than that, but we tend to hover around the mid-80s, which is a great funded level for municipal pensions. The JRIB is the fiduciary governing board. It's the combination of 2 boards, actually. It's the Police and Fire Retirement Board and the Employee Retirement Board. Taken together, we're 15 people in total. 8 town volunteers, 5 union representatives, the town's CFO, and the town's first selectman. We are long-term focused. Let me assure you, we are not short-term focused. We're not traders. We allocate against an investment policy statement that we work on every 2 years. And that's vetted alongside our OCIO, which in this case was Vanguard. So that should give you a little sense of who we are and how we operate. We have 6 meetings a year, and we also approve pensions that come before us. So people who retire in town will meet, and as long as they meet the criteria to enter into the pension plans, we will approve them into the plan. So the performance. So the pension plan itself, as of September 30th, $427 million in assets in the pension plans. It's allocated this way. 52% in equities, 33% in fixed income, just under 9% in alternatives, which is all in private equity, and 6.2% in real estate. The OPEB funds, market value of those assets as of September 30th, $77.2 million. That allocation is 70% equities, 19% fixed income, 9% real estate, 2% private equity. The reason that the OPEB allocation is so much heavily more tilted toward equities is two reasons. One, we've just begun a private equity alternatives allocation in OPEB. It's just gotten to a size that's large enough that we can allocate to alternatives. So what will happen is as capital is called to the alternatives, we'll sell down from the equities to fund the private equity. And so you'll see the equity will fall, the private equity will go up, and over time it will reflect more of the pension allocation. But it will also keep a more aggressive footing because OPEB doesn't have any distributions going out of it yet. It's a young fund that's being built for future use, whereas the pensions currently have payments going out of it each month to meet the needs of the pensioners. It's kind of like saving for retirement when you're in your 20s and you're not taking the money out versus putting money into your retirement account when you're in your 50s. Okay, so that explains the different tilts from the allocations. If I were to characterize the performance of the funds, and they're managed similarly, good, solid. Last fiscal year, we exceeded our discount rate by a little bit. The discount rate's 6.9%. That's the rate at which we try to exceed so as to not have to ask you, the town, to fund to meet our shortfall in order to meet the current actuarial defined obligations. We have our JRIB meeting this week on Wednesday. We'll be getting the December performance numbers probably later tonight. I would anticipate that our numbers are going to be very strong because our allocation for equities is so high, and the fourth quarter of 2023 equities performance was just so very strong. So I would assume we've had a very good fourth quarter. I think we're in good shape. On the administrative side, over the last 12 to 15 months, we made a decision, the JRIB, to outsource pension administration over to a firm called Milliman. This essentially modernizes our service and removes our reliance on filing cabinets and paper files. It was a 15-month process that we're nearly finished. We expect to go live in June. And I really want to publicly thank our HR and benefits teams for an amazing amount of effort to facilitate this transaction. What this will do is so a retiree changes their address or wants to check their balance, they won't have to call benefits. They'll be able to go online and be able to do that themselves. It seems like we should have done this a long time ago, but we're here. Congratulations. You should know from a diligence standpoint, guys, 50 years of filing cabinet information has now gone into databases. From a diligence standpoint, I can vouch. We've done a really great job. The town of Fairfield has done a great job keeping really good records. We would have picked up anything that would have been an error. Things that came about were tiny. And very easily managed. And so that's when you would see anything would have crawled out from under the carpet. And so that was one of the things we were worried about. I was worried about, but they passed with flying colors. Importantly, the move to Milliman does not replace the benefits department or the really important human role that the human benefit manager plays when a town employee chooses to retire. And the decisions that go along with that, and their decision to apply to enroll in the pension plan. So that role continues. Okay. So third thing I wanted to bring up tonight is current events. I told you we really like working with Vanguard. They produce these awesome reports that help us do a better job managing and governing the investments. Well, they threw us a curveball. On December 5th, they announced that they're selling their OCIO business to Mercer, but they're not selling the public pension business to Mercer, and they're not going to continue servicing the OCIO business. So they're effectively vacating, and we're being orphaned. And so are in a little bit of a scramble, and so we are looking for a new OCIO for our $500 million. So on December 6th, we were fortunate, we had a JRIB meeting. We formed a subcommittee, the OCIO Search Committee. We negotiated with Vanguard that we would be serviced in full by them, not for the 30 days they offered, but for 90 days post their transaction closing. So that gives us a good amount of runway. They've been very good at working with us. Vanguard has. We've negotiated with the private equity fund that they've introduced us to. They'd hold flat our private equity fees, and we wouldn't revert to retail fees. And we've identified a search consultant. We went from 25 potentials down to 2, down to 1. They'll be voted on Wednesday at the JRIB meeting. And we're going to go right into issuing an RFP to find a new OCIO. We expect that will take about 8 weeks, maybe 9 weeks. Look to have a finalist identified by the end of April, and the accounts moved over by the end of June. So it's under control, but it's moving at a breakneck pace. I'm very grateful for the 15 people on the JRIB who have decided that they've making this a priority. And so we are full steam ahead. So to conclude, the funded status remains strong. We're on target to perform in line. The move to Milliman is going very smoothly, and we're hustling, as you might imagine, to find a new OCIO, and we're doing it in accordance to all the governance practices and issuing an RFP, and doing what we can. I welcome you to our meetings. Please come on Wednesday. It's really exciting. If you'd like, please reach out to me. If you have any questions, reach out to any of us on the JRIB. With that, I'm happy to pause for questions.
Thank you so much. Representative Georgiadis.
Hello, Drew Georgiadis, District 9. Just for some people that don't this is the first time they're on the RTM or don't look at your pension thing, can you help us with some of the acronyms like OCIO and JRIB and just for general knowledge this first time? Thank you.
So the JRIB is the Joint Retirement Investment Board, all right? So that's the pension board. The OCIO, I should have spelled that out. That's the Outsourced Chief Investment Officer. So it's the investment manager who works with us, right? So that's and I should explain for those who are new. Until 2020, the JRIB used a consultant, terrific consultant, to help the JRIB decide how to allocate the funds, where to invest the funds. And we worked side by side with consultants. With the evolution of the industry, a new thing came about, this OCIO. And the OCIO is a co-fiduciary, which means they have to put our interests ahead of their interests. And new businesses came about. And Vanguard became our OCIO. And with that, we pay them a fee. And they manage the funds for us. They look at those funds every day, right? We meet 6 times a year. They look at the funds every day. And they manage to our investment policy statement. And so it's a governance tool. It's a fiduciary tool, and it's been a really great partnership for us.
Thank you. Representative Kuhn.
Hi, Representative Kuhn, District 7. How are you doing?
I've had a really busy December.
I'm concerned a little bit on the fees, and I know you do a great job of managing them. You mentioned the private equity fund, and what is that fund? Is it a fund of funds?
Yeah, so they're fund of funds. So those, I'll go into detail of that. That actually was made December very vexing. So that was a private equity fund of funds. We were introduced to them as part of the Vanguard feeder fund. And we chose them as part of a diligence process in part because of their broad-based exposure to private equity. The JRIB, right? The JRIB does diligence, brings managers in, evaluates a cross-section of fund of funds, predominantly for private equity. And this one was a very, broad-based, highly regarded, low-fee structure, fund of funds. But the low fee.
What's low fee? I mean, I know that a lot of these funds are like 2 and 20.
Yeah, so I don't know off the top of my head.
But
I can
just
tell you.
directionally, not
Yeah.
that. I
Yeah,
assume.
so no, not that. Directionally, not that. But I can tell you that the difference, had we not been able to secure them holding our fee flat, that number I have in my head. And that would have been the difference for us paying $1.5 million, continuing to pay $1.5 million per year on our committed capital. It would have gone up to almost $5 million a year on the committed
Just
capital.
for that fund,
For that
allocation.
For that allocation.
And when you say private equity, you mean?
So we have three legacy private equity investments, right? And then we have 3 allocations into private equity under this Vanguard feeder fund.
But I guess my question is, are these all LBO funds? Are they hedge funds?
No. They're private equity. They're broad-based private equity. They're not venture cap. They're not LBO. In the legacy funds we've got a secondaries fund. We've got one that is more of a technology-based fund that's at the end of its life. But these are predominantly mid-stage private equity. Consider it more broad-based tech industrials financials growth.
Okay.
If you want to look, if you want detail, it's in the report. There's a
Okay.
whole section on the private equity piece.
Okay, good.
And we can talk offline too.
Thank you. Representative
Not
Pistilli.
enough to take all this time.
Sharon Pistilli, District 5, through you, Madam Moderator. Thanks so much for coming before us. I have some questions. Some might be a little elementary. So my first question, with Vanguard selling to Mercer, do we have to change our investment strategy? Like, do we still have access to those Vanguard funds? Or does everything have to be reinvested?
It depends on which way we go.
Okay, so that wasn't a dumb question. Good. Okay. All right. Next one on the record keeping. So when the record keeping became automated, I'm trusting that this will make this next transition rather seamless because everything is now digital as opposed to in a filing cabinet. And so there was a complete audit when the record keeping was, migrated to a database. So now we know for sure that our liabilities are ticked and tied in terms of who's eligible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, now we know.
Okay. And do we know the impact of the VRIP on our liability?
No.
Is there any way to find that out?
I don't know. Oh, yeah, sure. Mathematically, arithmetically, probably an actuarial study could be done into that.
Okay.
Order one to be done. It would be expensive.
I'll see if, okay, let me think about that. The other thing is, I was wondering if you could explain the volatility on page 14, your page 14, our slide 39 in the packet, on the portfolio performance when you see the gangbuster 21, 22, 23. I understand directionally what happened in the market during that time, but it might be helpful for you to add some color to that because we saw a bit of a swing there.
Which year again?
So it was If you look at
Slide number?
your slide, your page number 14, our slide 39 in the backup, portfolio performance.
I mean, we had a bonkers, crazy 2021. And I mean, we had a plus, pensions were up 25%, OPEB was up 33%. You're not going to repeat that in 2022.
No. So that the 22 was the market correction.
22 was the market correction.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how overall, how has inflation impacted our investment strategy?
Well, I don't know how is it? It's been awful on the real estate funds, right? We run a diversified portfolio, remember, and the investments, remember, equity portfolio and the fixed income portfolio are both in whole market index funds, right? So we're not trying to look or pick at sectors or at whether we're trying to be cyclical or non-cyclical or tech. 70% of the market performance in the third quarter of last year came from 7 stocks. I'm happy to say we owned all 7, but we also own the 3,300 other stocks, right? Because we own the full market. And so we're not trying to be too cute. We're just trying to have this very broad-based exposure, which has worked very, very well over the past several years for us. Inflation has had great impact on the fixed income portfolios, obviously, much more so than the equity side. Arguably, we, could have done more with the fixed income side, but the investment policy statement and the framework we have is one where we take a much more of a long-term view, and we kind of followed the direction of the OCIO to kind of maintain that allocation at 33% fixed income.
Keep your hand on the rudder and we're fine. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Representative Carroll.
Thank you. Chris Carroll, District 8. What is, I'll get into the weeds too much. What is the thing that keeps you up at night as you look out over the next 3 to 5 years? Does anything worry you about this?
Well, I didn't have Vanguard sells the business on my bingo card. Really didn't anticipate having to do an OCIO search. I have to say I lost a lot of sleep in December. The funds are great. Funds are well managed. There's not a lot of risk overall to the portfolios. There's the investment manager, the custodian is in a different place, right? Wilmington Trust is our custodian. M&T Bank manages a piece of it. Like we're nice. We're not too consolidated in one place. We manage this very prudently. We put into place, when I became chair, we had put into place 3 signatures. And so there's redundancy, so I have a signature, town has a signature, and Wilmington Trust, the bank has to call both of us, double signatures. And so, there's very tight stops, very tight controls. It's a significant amount of funds. It's a very large liability, right? And so from my standpoint, I feel so much better today than I did when I walked in. I think the group before me that, tightened it down from then, right? I mean, it's just been a consistent process to improve, a consistent everyday effort to improve the governance, the care, just the way that the way that we look at it, the way we manage it. I've been delighted to have an OCIO being alongside us. But I've been really, really happy to have the double and triple signatures on everything too.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Britton.
Can you give us an idea of, if you know, the performance in Q4? Can we have a sense of where we ended up at the end of the year? Is that fair?
I can't because I haven't seen December. I think November was like a plus 11. December was better than November, just looking at the charts. Could have been a very good
So
quarter.
that'd be plus 40 million, 45.
I would love that. I don't know. I don't know how big it will be. We'll see, right? I mean, we get the private equity results on a 3-month lag. They come in, I get the real estate on a 3-month lag. And they get blended in. And so we have to look at that, right? Because private equity has not performed well this year, right? It's a diversified portfolio. And so some things are doing great, some things are not doing great, and it all comes out together. So, and as far as it affects the town, we smooth. It's a 5-year smoothing. Right? So it then goes through the magic of the actuarial mathematics, right? And we do a 5-year smoothing. And so as much as I love that plus 33% performance number from the OPEP a couple of years ago, I mean, that got smoothed. And when we had the down year the year after that, you didn't feel the full brunt of that.
Thank you, Representative Zezima.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Liz Esmond, District 4. Carolyn, great to see you, and thanks for your work on the board. So just kind of a little bit of a macro question, especially in the pension fund, since it's more of a short-term management. Whether it's Vanguard or someone else, what is our flexibility with changing the allocation, and what would trigger such a thing? You've got leading indicators, lagging indicators, things that you may need to respond to, but in general terms, what allows us, what are we allowed to do in terms of providing guidance on that allocation, and what would have to happen for it to change significantly?
Well, firstly, it's a partnership decision, right? It's your investment manager, your OCIO, brings ideas together, and your board comes together. But the elements that are going to contribute to that outcome are going to be things like your discount rate, right? I mean, how aggressive do you need to be to meet your target? So, for example, a recent study that might actually be in here would suggest that with the private equity allocation we might actually be earning enough kind of if you think 30 years forward and you discount back, we might be at a point where we could actually take the risk down in the portfolio because the performance outlook looks really very strong, right? In which case we don't need to be so heavily weighted toward equities. Or alternatively, if we continue to see rates high, right? If we continue to see fixed income rates stay pretty elevated, the equity piece doesn't have to work as hard, right? And so you can have a nice allocation to fixed income, and you can have a yields contribute to the performance. And so you could really think about your allocation from a standpoint of being more of a balanced, a 60-40 it could work for you. Alternatively, you might want to look toward employing more alternatives. So there are a lot of variables that come into play. We're very fortunate that we can have a discussion that allows us to consider those variables because because we're funded, our funded status is high, because we've done well against kind of our discount rate, because we took that medicine early on, we can really have a robust conversation about what's right for the town, where the numbers are, and we can really plan for the future. So, I think we're at a really nice point with these funds. And I think that's going to be part of the conversation with the search for the new OCIO, is to get a sense of what they think for us.
Thank you. And one last question. Is it ever advisable to be at 100%, or is that considered a risky position to be in?
I think there was some point that this town was at 100%, right? And you just didn't make contributions into the pension fund because you didn't need to. So I would, wouldn't that be exciting? So I think our objective has to be to deliver the best risk-adjusted returns that we can, right? Within the framework.
Thank you. Any other questions regarding the report? Seeing none, we'll continue with Ms. Trabucco. If she hasn't proved why she belongs on the board, I don't know how else you could do that, but she's up for reappointment to the board. I don't think you have to go along and tell us why you're qualified, but maybe why you want to continue. If you want to say anything, go ahead.
I need one more sleepless nights. It has been an honor and a privilege to be on this board. Clearly, if you can't tell, I love it. I really like doing this. This is my background. This is what I enjoy doing, and I'm very much committed to it. And I'm delighted to continue. Would like to continue with it. Yes, and it's been a real it's been a real privilege to be a part of it.
Thank you so much. Any other questions, comments from the body? Representative Kuhn.
Representative Kuhn, District 7, just a comment. Thank you for your service. You're an asset to the town.
Thank you. Representative Walk.
Representative, thank you, Madam Moderator. Jay Walk, District 5. Just quick, and you have a great board too. Very, very smart people on your board. Thank you.
Yeah, we do. It is a terrific board.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Carolyn. We really appreciate everything. And the clerk will let you know. I know you have a conflict next week. I don't expect you to come back, but if anyone has any further questions, just put them through me. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to move on to presentation order 6 and agenda order 8. We welcome back former Representative Galdenzi to the RTM. Some people can't go away, they need to come back. Jeff's here for appointment to the HVAC Indoor Air Quality Building Committee. Can you tell us a little bit about why you want to be on the committee and what your qualifications for that are?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. So Jeff Galdenzi, I was on the RTM for the last 2 years. I had some conversations with the Board of Selectmen, and we thought it would be a very good fit for my background. I do work for a fuel cell company now. I've worked for some energy companies in the past. I've been involved in some building projects. I also do a lot of vendor management through my professional career. So there's a lot of budgets and large project allocations with multiple vendors. So there's a lot of overlap with the type of work that's going to be done through that committee. I have had a couple conversations with Mr. Becker, who is the chairman of the committee. So I've discussed with him some of the aspects of the committee and what to expect going forward. There is no end date on the appointment, so it's a possibly long road. We have quite a few schools in town that all of which need air exchange and HVAC systems.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Galdenzi? Jeff, we really appreciate your commitment to the town. We miss you on this board.
Thank you all.
Thank you. I don't think there's any questions. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
We're going to move on to item order 7, agenda 9, regarding the Solid Waste and Recycling Commission. I think Ellen Fateh, did I say that correctly? Fatehi, Mr. Fatehi, if you could come up, let us know a little bit about yourself and why you want to serve on the commission. Oh, I'm so sorry. Was she online? Okay, 1 second. We'll have the clerk find out what happened, and we'll move on to Mr. Blumenfield. If you could come up and let us know a little bit. Thank you. Yeah, just keep the button down, push down, and let us a little know about.
That's the one.
Perfect.
Good evening. I've been a resident of this town. I've lived in the same house since 1977. I served on the Board of Health many years ago, and I want to continue to give back to the town that we've come to love very, very much. I consider myself an environmentalist. I'm interested in trash and recycling, so this seemed like a perfect fit for me.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for Mr. Blumenfield? Representative Pistilli.
Sharon Pistilli, District 5. I was chair of solid waste and recycling for 10 years, and I share your passion. I just want to say thanks for serving.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative McCabe.
Michelle McCabe, District 4. Hello. I'm just wanted to say thank you. It's so nice to see you coming back to service, and just wonderful to have you on considering this board.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Blumenfield, for sitting through that. We really appreciate your commitment. Thank you. And we'll move on to presentation order 8 and agenda order 10, the reappointment of Arthur Gravanis to the Historic District Commission. I believe he's via phone. Is there someone via phone?
Good evening, everyone. Art Gravanis here. I'm on video. Hopefully you can hear and see me.
We can hear you. Thank you. If you could let us know a little bit about yourself and why you want to be on the Historic District Commission, that would be wonderful.
Thank you for that. I finished my first 5-year term as a commissioner on the HDC. I've lived in Fairfield here for over 30 years. I have lived in both of the homes I've owned are in the Historic District. Currently, I'm in the Greenfield Hill Historic District. I've really enjoyed serving on the HDC. I will submit that given that this is a volunteer position in the last 5 years, I think I can count on less than half of one hand of mine how many monthly meetings I've missed. I've been a consistent attendee, and I'd like to continue for another 5 years. And I would also add that whether you reappoint me or not, your Historic District Commission is in excellent hands. We have in our chairman, Adam Cliver, someone who takes their position very seriously, and I think is a credit to the town. So given the current makeup, all the commissioners and alternates I would submit are contributing to the town, and we take our job very seriously. And I think we contribute to the historic makeup of Fairfield. And I also would submit that we're sensitive to the not only the applicants who are looking for certificates of appropriateness, but also the general public, because we all have a stake in Fairfield's heritage. So thank you, and I'd like to continue and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for your service, Mr. Gravanis. Are there any other questions for him? Representative Britton.
Peter Britton, District 1. Does this include Southport?
If you might clarify, is your question that the Southport Historic District is part of our commission?
Yes, exactly.
Yes. There are 3 distinct historic districts here in Fairfield. There's the Greenfield Hill District, the Old Post Road District and the Southport Village District. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? Representative Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris Shea, District 2, RTM. I just wanted to say that I served with Art on the Historic District Commission for many years, and he's done a wonderful job, and I am thrilled to see that he's looking to be reappointed.
Thank you.
If I may respond to that, given the fact that
Go ahead.
we have, but this is important because it's a credit to the town. I served with Chris Shea on the Historic District for 5 years. I'm sorry to see him leave, but I'm happy to see him still involved in government. But for the benefit of all citizens of Fairfield, I want to acknowledge Mr. Shea that we never always agreed on the resolution of the issues. Sometimes we disagreed, but I always respected Chris Shea for how prepared he came to every historic district meeting. He looked at all the proposals. He asked intelligent questions, and it's people like Chris Shea, who I'm glad to see is still part of town government. That level of commitment and just the effort he put in to be thorough in everything he did and taking it seriously. And that's part of what makes this town great. So just a shout out to Chris Shea and someone who puts the effort in and takes it seriously. So, kudos to all of you, particularly Chris. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Thank you. We're happy to have him on the board too. Are there any other
Excellent.
questions? Seeing none, thank you so much. Oh, okay, great. Thank you so much, Mr. Davis. We appreciate that and your commitment to everything.
Happy to do it. Thank you.
Yes. We're going to go back to, it looks like Ellie Fateh, I'm sorry I said that wrong, is online now. Ellie, if you're online, if you could take yourself off mute and tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to be on the commission. Unfortunately, we're not hearing her. We'll come back if that's a problem. We'll move on to Mr. Bowen, who's been on here, probably the first person on here today. Mr. Bowen, if you want to come up and give a little bit about yourself and why you want to be on the Historic District Commission, that would be wonderful.
Sure, happy to. First of all, thanks to all of you for being here. Fairfield is a great town, and the RTM is one of the reasons it is that. I've lived in Southport for 57 years. Been fortunate to have lived in Southport for 57 years. And 10 years ago, I completed just a terrific 51-year engineering career at Sikorsky Aircraft. Wonderful, wonderful job. And I've just completed my first term on the Historic District Commission, much like Art. I've worked on real estate development in the Old Post Road and the Southport Village Historic Districts over the past 50 years. They've been a lot of fun and very satisfying. And Fairfield's historic districts are jewels. They're absolute jewels. And the commission work is fun, it's satisfying, and I'd be very grateful to be appointed again. It's just a wonderful job.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for Mr. Bowen? Seeing none, Mr. Bowen, thank you so much for being online for so long. We appreciate your commitment.
You're
and,
very welcome.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to try it one more time. I'm not going to butcher your name one more time. Ellie, if you could let us know, hopefully you're on. You can tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to be on the commission.
Hi, good evening. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Wonderful. Sorry about that earlier. So my name is Ellie Fatahi, and I guess one of the main reasons that I'm interested in joining this committee is due to my background in public health and in pharmacy. I've been very involved in kind of the impact of our environment on health outcomes. And with that, when my oldest was in kindergarten, I started a green team at his elementary school, which has flourished into a town-wide coalition with the rest of the Fairfield Public Schools. And I've had an opportunity to kind of learn more about our waste problem and how it impacts just the impact of our environment and how we manage waste on our health. And with that, this opportunity came about, and I thought it's a great way to just link all of the programs that we've implemented with the schools and collaborate with the town even further to potentially kind of just kind of look for opportunities for improvement.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you so much for coming on here. We appreciate it, your commitment, and we look forward to your work. We'll let you know if you need to come back. Thank you. Mr. Clark, I know you've been here a long time. Thank you for waiting. If you could come up and let us know a little bit about yourself and why you want to be on the Historic Commission.
Good evening. My name is George Clark. I've lived in Fairfield since '93, but I grew up here in 1960 as a child before I moved away. I really enjoy working on homes and being involved in keeping Southport and Fairfield and the historic districts compatible with what we're trying to achieve, which is really a great town and really love the historic nature. I live on Old South, which is like a real model street from the historic perspective. I like working with Chris Shays. I can speak to Art really said it all. I can't follow in for him, but working with Adam and Art and Jim and the other members of the historic district are really a pleasure to work with. We try to keep our applicants happy with their appropriateness and trying to work with them on maintaining the environment we love so much and we really enjoy. Any questions? I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Clark.
And by the way, thank you for all that you all do for our town.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Clark? Oh, Representative Shea.
I'll just echo, Mr. Clark, it's Chris Shea, RTM District 2. George, it's been a pleasure to work with you on the Historic District Commission. And, you do live in probably the prettiest street in town. And it's one of my favorite addresses. And it's really a pleasure to watch how the fabric of our historic districts have been maintained over the years through your efforts and working with prospective applicants, and how sometimes it's really challenging to subjectively make modifications to historic properties that really we want to maintain the beauty. So I appreciate your willingness to serve again on the Historic District Commission.
I can do this. Thank you, Chris. It's a push and a pull. We try to maintain it, but you have to live in these homes. I mean, people have a right to live there, so you want to make them happy and give them the quality of life that they want in their home. At the same time, you want to maintain the fabric of the community. So it's give and get. It isn't a perfect science, but we really try to maintain our town.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Clark. Appreciate your time here. I believe Miss Titel, did I say that correctly? Thank you so much for waiting. Is coming up to talk about why she wants to be here on the FairTV Commission and what her qualifications are for that. Thank you.
That's fine. Hi, everyone. I'm Suzanne Titel. I was looking to get involved in the town in some way. My role, I work at NYU at the School of Medicine in the city, and part of my role is overseeing communications for the research mission. The other role, I oversee the graduate school. But so I thought this would be a nice segue into that, to work on some communication in the town with the FairTV.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Titel? Mr. Wolk, Representative Wolk.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Jay Wolk, District 5. First of all, thanks for stepping up to the plate. I've been involved with FairTV for a long time. One of the things I have to ask you is, are you going to make the meetings? Are you going to be able to make, because they've had a problem with getting quorums for a long time. So I don't know if you heard about this, or if they've spoken to you. So, I just realized, the last person who resigned, she barely made a meeting. So hopefully you'll be there when the meetings take place. Is that something that,
Yeah, I'm good at attending meetings.
Also, I'm happy you're going to be there, really.
I attend a lot of meetings. Yeah, I will attend them.
And so you know that FairTV is different parameters than regular TV. Totally different. There's a governing board to to FairTV. Well, thanks for stepping up, and maybe we'll get a chance to talk one day. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for the background.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you so much for waiting throughout the meeting. We appreciate it. Thank you for your commitment. Next up, we're going to move on to item number 12 on our presentation order, item 15 regarding the Duck Farm Road Bridge. Bill Hurley's online, I believe, our town engineer.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. Thank you, Mr. Hurley. If you just want to give us a summary of this item.
Sure. Sorry, I'm not able to attend in person. I had a late doctor's appointment, but hopefully I can explain this rather easily. The proposed revised resolution is to match the final project authorization letter or agreement from the state. This involved the project having an increase in project costs of $89,376, but also an increase in grant funding of $39,501. And it also showed an increase in the town share of approximately $49,875. But it does not include the credits such as the Aquarian reimbursement of $40,000 and any minor or moderate project adjustments. Overall, the additional town share costs are anticipated to be below $10,000, and the project was almost a $4 million project, and could even go lower if there's any pending unused extra work components or final audits, which would be completed in a couple of years. The revised agreement has included all known construction costs and construction phases, and has already been approved by the state and the federal government for any adjustments related to the project that were eligible for 80% reimbursement, with the exception of the Aquarian Water Company utility work. The original resolution was based on the consulting engineers and DOT estimates for the project, and a preliminary authorization letter was used to obtain funding so that the project could go out to bid. The proposed or final resolution and the project authorization letter are necessary based on the additional project costs and the additional grant money provided to the town. These agreements are based on the final and closeout costs documented from the project and approved again by the Connecticut Department of Transportation and Federal Bridge Program. There was some backup included, and also the resolution, which has been reviewed and vetted by the bond, our bond person that we have in town, and by the town attorney. So I'm here to answer any questions anyone might have.
Thank you. Any questions for for Mr. Hurley, Representative Garskoff?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Josh Garskoff, District 5. Thanks, Mr. Hurley. I think I misunderstood because it looks to me, looking at the resolution, that we're adding about 800,000. Did I misunderstand something?
It was to increase the bond authorization to 795,835. The original bond, let me see if I have it in the back up here. I think the original bond resolution, let's see, 795, was 745,960.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Steele.
Thank you, Jeff Steele, District 3. Bill, just with last month's project coming to us, and it was just a massive increase for the air conditioning in 2 schools, 3 schools. What is the 90,000? Like, why did it go up?
The project was, it took a little longer. There was extra utility work involved, and it was just the cost of a project. Now, again, keep in mind that the total town share is only going to be $10,000 extra than what was originally approved, even before we went out to bid.
No, I understand that. I was just asking what
With the bond
$90,000 increase.
With the bond resolution of 3.729, see, resolution of costs associated with it. These are just part of the project costs. Some aspects of the costs had gone down with the project, and some had gone up. There was construction, administration, and inspection, which went up. Some of the state oversight had gone down, and then some of the projects, there were a couple of extras on the project for the construction portion of it as well. But as I said, it only ends up being about $10,000 for almost a $4 million bridge in terms of the extra cost. This resolution also included the additional grant money that we're getting as well. Because anytime we get grant money, it has to go through the 3 boards as well.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Hurley? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Hurley. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
You too. We're going to move on to item number 3. Let's see. Item number 13 on the presentation order 16 on the agenda regarding the appropriation of funds for the costs related to Penfield Pavilion. I believe online we have Mr. Rochief, the project manager from Bismarck, as well as Eli Gasol from Fairfield. And here in front of us, we have First Selectman Gerber. He gets to go last today. Next week, he gets to go first. I'm not sure which one of you is going to give us the presentation.
Well, let me just explain what is going on first. I'm not sure what presentation you would like. We are here to talk about approximately $1.4 million, 1,429,950 increase in our ask for the project.
Yeah, just give us a little summary of why you guys are asking for that.
Yeah, so in the backup, you can see, I'm not sure what page it is of the backup, but it's a breakdown of the increase in expense. 809,476 is due to the guaranteed maximum price bid that came in from the subcontractors to our main contractor, Bismarck, and Mr. Rauchi is here today and can answer any additional questions. But the breakout of that 809,476 is in the backup. I would draw your attention to the bottom two in that breakout. Helical piles is 0.2 million. Foundation miscellaneous metals is 0.1. So 0.3 is what is considered in the 50-50 valuation. The decks and ramps came in 0.3 over the initial estimate, and the builder's risk insurance that we talked a fair amount about was, I think, about double what the original estimate was. So there's the 0.8. We have about 5% contingency within Bismarck's budget, but we felt it would be wise to add a 5% contingency in the town's owner's budget. So that comes out to 620,474. Both the town's contingency and Bismarck's contingency would be refunded if we don't need them, but we felt it prudent to have those. Just quickly, because I don't know if everyone knows what we mean by helical piles. Should I explain that briefly?
Go ahead, thank you.
So when I was on this body, there was a presentation to the RTM, the date that we got this approved. And there was a plan to dig underneath the building, dig out the structure, I think to go about 5 feet down, build new horizontal grade beams at what's called the natural grade, which was deemed by FEMA to be 8 feet, connect those new horizontal grade beams to the columns, the existing columns, so that they would be attached to the building, cut away the old horizontal grade beams that are at elevation 11, which would be exposed once all that fill was taken out and the beach went down to 8 feet. That would have caused, and you all probably remember, those who were on this body, that would have caused an obstruction, which would have been dangerous. It would have, storm surge could have toppled the building. At the time, the idea was that by building it at 8 feet, it would not be an obstruction because that's where the sand would be. And FEMA was okay with that. But Mr. Rauchi hired Race Coastal Engineering to come in and calculate the load of that foundation plan. And they decided that, that the calculation was clear. It would have been very risky because the pressure of those horizontal grade beams on the wood pilings that they would sit on would be too great and could snap and topple the building. So they went back to the drawing board with Race and re-engineered the foundation using helical piles, which I think a lot of people down at the beach are familiar with because that's sort of what a lot of the homes are sitting on. But this is a very large helical pile structure with, I believe, 400 helical piles. On top of that is poured concrete, and then the building, the poured concrete on top of the helical piles are like a puzzle. They're like segments. They're not all attached. But the building then rests on that. The load calculations work. And at this point, everyone is comfortable with the design. But the concrete within that plan is going to cost, or the metals and concrete within that plan are going to cost $0.3 million more. So a big chunk of this is that, but a big chunk of this is the owner's contingency as well.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions so far for either Mr. Rochi or our first selectman? Seeing none, is there anything Mr. Rochi wants to contribute online or say?
Well, I'm pretty impressed. I think Bill did a great job explaining
I agree.
the
Thank you.
circumstances.
Great. Thank you.
And the best part is we have received bids, and they've extended their bids so that we can award soon. We just need approval to move forward. Where the building sits now, the town is doing the remediation of the hot spots. And I think now that we're past the first of the year, we can do the last hot spot and get rid of some of the fill. I think it's a good idea carrying the allowance we're talking about in contingencies, only because we have done tests, and I think we're about 4 feet down in the soils that have to be removed. But there might be a situation the vein might continue a little bit further, and that's just an unknown at the moment. We can't verify that until we start doing removals. So I feel pretty comfortable with the resolution, what we're looking for. The engineers at the last meeting confirmed they're confident with the new design, and we're ready to move.
Well, thank you for that. May I add something?
Go ahead.
So, I'm not actually adding, I'm just reiterating what Mr. Rauchi just said. The guaranteed maximum price bid is for the construction, but it is for a defined amount of contaminated fill based on what they've seen and what they estimate based on core samples. And there is the real risk remaining with this amount of money is that they could hit, as Mr. Rauchi said, if they hit a vein that they didn't expect and it turns out there's PCBs in it or something like that, that could make us spend more. Unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, the way it depends on how you look at it, that's sort of irrelevant for the building costs because we would have to remove those no matter what. And so it doesn't really factor into my thinking about whether we should have proceeded with this or not, because if we find something, it's got to go.
Right.
Thank you. Representative Pistilli?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Sharon Pistilli, District 5. Could you explain the unexpected increase in construction costs, the construction insurance?
Yeah, this was something that I talked a lot about as an RTM member, about, the risk of the project was greater than I believe, or at least perceived by the insurance companies, who are also, it's just, yeah, I mean, when I was at the time when we were presented this project and gave approval, they hadn't been able to get the project insurance yet. They'd gone out to, I believe at the time they said something like 50, companies, and nobody was willing to bid. Ultimately, before I took office, they were able to find insurance, but at a much higher price. So I believe that typically would mean that the project is less straightforward than, they expected or was perceived to be.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative McCabe?
Michelle McCabe, District 4. Back in March, when we had to vote on this, I was definitely very concerned about the integrity of the building, and coming back now asking for more funds is very concerning to me. I don't know if situation has changed at all, but one of the considerations that we were not allowed to address in March was the possibility of demolition and a rebuild of a pavilion that was more able to withstand the climate concerns that we have today. And I'm curious Is that a possibility this time around that we have some choices here, or are we pretty much locked into the building as it currently stands?
That's a good question. I originally, back in March, when I was on the RTM, I had sort of done a rough calculation, which was kind of confirmed a week after the approval, based on a letter that I guess was online on the website, that the administration had estimated that it would be cheaper by about $900,000 to knock it down and then rebuild it up to the current code. But there were certain reasons they didn't want to do that, including the length of time it would take and the hoops they'd have to go through. We, thanks to Eli Gazal, we asked Mr. Rauchi to estimate what it would cost today. And first of all, nobody, to be fair, Mr. Rauchi did not come up with that $10.1 million number. I'm actually not sure where it came from. But the cost that he estimated was $17 million. So for the same building, to me, that's not, we could do it, but it would not be the bargain that we, that I thought it might be. It's a substantial increase. And it's not on top of 17 million for the whole project. But in terms of knocking it down and building something smaller, that was another option. I mean, unfortunately, we could do that. But if you look at the original estimates of what it would cost to knock down, which is substantial, knock down and remove and cart off. I think going back to March of 2023, that estimate was about $2 million, including all the electrical stuff. And I believe Mr. Rauchi can confirm, but that included also, you'd be left with two buildings, one on each side, that would require some work to get those to be in a usable condition. That was about $2 million to knock down. And sort of, if we were going to rebuild something smaller, the prior administration did an estimate through DPW that would be about $2.5 million. So when you add everything up, you could do that and save a couple $1 million. But when I look at the calculus and as well as the fact that I don't really see a way of getting that done, because we have to start work within the next month or so we are facing a deadline from FEMA. We'd have to go through a whole set of approvals. We would have to reject, the RTM would have to reject this project. It wouldn't necessarily, by rejecting, that doesn't mean that the RTM could amend it or approve another project. It would have to go through the whole process again. It's unlikely we'd come to a resolution very quickly, and I think we would fall into noncompliance with FEMA and end up, with all of the issues that we were facing last time. So when you look at put it into columns and the positives and negatives, I think this is the most reasonable approach at this point. If we are to have anything at the beach, if we were to knock everything down and just make it a clean beach with nothing there, we would probably save money. We would probably save, I think, according to Mr. Rauchi's, this was a long time ago, but his calculations that the digging of the soil would be somewhat easier and we would save money digging out the contaminated soil because there wouldn't be a building there. But I'm not sure. I can ask him. At the time, you thought it might be $1 million less. I think it was $4 million of the estimate was to dig it out without a building, and about $5 million with the building there. And I'm sure those numbers have changed, but
it's close.
But to clarify, I just want to be sure I understand that none of those are options because of the FEMA deadline, correct? So that,
We don't have a plan
right.
that, to do that, so it would require a long time to be able to do that. We'd fall into non-compliance with FEMA.
Thank you.
Representative Shea.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Couple of questions I have, just kind of process questions on this project. So we're presently in at odds with FEMA, and we're not in compliance. And we went ahead and built this very expensive pavilion that is not compliant. And I'm just curious, why aren't the engineers and the contractors that built this non-compliant structure being held accountable?
That's a great question. I don't really know why that wasn't pursued more vigorously, but the statute of limitations have run out on that.
Okay, and then the lower grade beam that we're going to be putting in, that's going to sit on top of the helical piles.
I'm sorry, there are no more grade beams. The grade beams design was replaced by a helical pile design. So they're going to cut away the grade beam and not replace it with another grade beam. They're going to replace it with helical piles.
Yeah, and a concrete pile cap.
Okay, so there'll be a pile cap,
Right.
which then the building would sit on.
Correct.
Sorry.
And that's at elevation 8?
Yeah, the beach will be at elevation 8.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Georgiadis.
Drew Georgiadis, District 9. Thank you for Selectman Gerber. I want to thank you for the diligence of the hotspots. Not only that they're under the building, that you're addressing the hotspots under the parking lot. As a resident of the beach area, I've been very concerned that there was contaminated fill under the asphalt, because we used to have permeable pavers, and they were replaced by the asphalt. So I'm happy to hear that. I want to thank First Selectman Gerber for reiterating the deadline, because that is something that will definitely be impacting my vote and my decision. And I wanted to also say, back in March, I put up an amendment to keep the 1/3 of the building, which was compliant, and knock down the 2/3. But it's since come to my attention that the 1/3 that is compliant would be at a height of compliance when it was built. And if we replace the 2/3 with new construction, it would have to be a foot higher, because it would have to meet 2023 or 2024 or 2025 FEMA regulations. And that just would create this very strange sort of discordant property. So now that I understand that, I have moved on from that dream. So thank you very much. And thank you for all the explanations of the helical pile and the deadlines. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I just want to point out that I take zero credit for the remediation of the hotspots. That would be Eli Gazal. That all happened before I started. And there's one remaining those were like PCBs, and they've been shipped off to various places, I believe mostly Michigan, right, Eli? But there's one remaining with less hazardous material, Connecticut regulated waste, I believe PAHs, and that's still, that was on hold, waiting for the new year when the quotas of the places that will take that waste reopen. They'd all met their quotas for the year, and I from what I hear from Eli, that's sort of what always happens every year.
Thank you. Representative Walk.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Thanks to you too, Bill, for everything you're doing. I'm Jay Walk from District 5. Anyway, my question is, I think I'm reiterating what you said, Madam Moderator. The question you brought up, I think last meeting was, so if this building gets, if we approve the monies and the building gets built, is that money that we're doing, is that going to fix all the problems that are in the building now? Because I think somewhere it came back that that the last administration said that DPW would be taking care of that and that would be part of the project. So I'm just trying to, does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense, Jay. There, whatever painting or floor sanding or whatever is going to have to be done by DPW. There were, and I don't know what that is. I don't think it's material. And there were complaints about a leak in the roof, and I don't believe that's been identified yet. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Zezima.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Liz Esma, District 4. Thank you for being here, First Selectman Gerber. I'm sorry that we did not have a longer lead time on the deadline. We did not analyze and debate more options, but I do feel pretty confident that what you've presented to us is justifiable. I mean, this increase is about 12%, so a little outside the normal 10% contingency. And I understand, of course, that we absolutely have to satisfy the notice of violation. Two things I just want to clarify for the body and the public. One is that we are still well within the 50-50 rule. In other words, we're under our expenditures that would count towards that or under 50% of the value of the building. And the other is, once FEMA signs off, we've satisfied the notice of violation and they're essentially, as a regulatory body, out of the picture. We can, if we choose and if the resiliency studies warrant, change not the elevation of the building, but we can create elevation differentials to help prevent flooding.
What was the first question again?
We're within
Yeah,
that
50-50. So in your backup, thanks to Mr. Rauchi, there was a breakout of what applies to the 50-50 rule. And the bottom line is $2,725,000. The 50% of the value of the building is 3.6. So there's a fair amount of room there, considering that, I mean, there's a lot of room considering that it's now a guaranteed maximum price that we have for the construction. So I don't think that's going to, I can't really see any way that that's a problem at this point. And for the calculation of the 50-50 rule, my predecessor's chief administrative officer had many conversations with FEMA, but FEMA's reluctant to, write their affirmation down in a letter. But we were fortunate to have a resident who pushed directly with FEMA. And FEMA, Melissa Surratt, people might remember her from the meeting at Ludlow. She responded and copied the CAO, who then forwarded to me, and she basically said, we've reviewed the information and we have no issues with it. So I feel pretty good that, they've reviewed the valuation methodology and the cost breakout methodology and numbers, and that they are, that's as good as we're going to get from FEMA, that they have no issues with it. We have had our own lawyers review the correspondence, and they don't see any issues either. So that's sort of where we are. I mean, I think we're in a good spot that way. I feel much better than I did before about it.
Great, thank you. And yeah, as far as our ability to, 8 feet is not an optimal elevation.
Yeah, no, 8 feet's not, and that was the reason for Flood and Erosion Control Board pushing to have 100,000 allocated specifically for a study that Race got that contract to do a flood study for something less than the 500-year storm. So there was sort of this standard that everyone looked at, that we should just look at a 500-year storm because that's what FEMA looks at for reimbursement of costs. And then when you do that, you're looking at major costs. So the Army Corps of Engineers did a study in 2017. They looked at the 500-year storm across the whole coastline, and I think their number in 2017 was about $500+ million, which would be maybe double that now. Of course, no one is ready to spend that. I guess FEMA looked at that and they said the cost benefit ratio was below the required ratio that they would need to fund it, to provide grants. And so that sort of died. But the people that live down the beach and the Flood and Erosion Control Board, they've never really focused on the 500-year flood. They focus on a 10-year flood and a 25-year flood. So they asked, they demanded that we have that as part of the RACE study. So RACE, I guess it's very complex modeling with gazillion scenarios. They've completed the 10-year study with no sea level rise. So it's a 10-year study that shows that there is significant breach at 8 feet at Penfield Pavilion. When the level of the elevation level goes down to 8 feet, you would expect that to breach significantly. There'd be, I believe, 5 or 6 other areas of the beach that would breach as well. And FECB wants to maintain, and I do too, the option of shoring up the whole coastline for a 10-year storm or maybe greater. I mean, we're going through that process of determining what the master plan should look like. Should it be a 10-year storm or a 15 or 20-year storm, 25-year storm? But what we found out from RACE, with this study, and what their recommendation was, well, one way or the other, that beach is going to 8 feet. And the reason is that we have several feet of fill that has to go. So once that fill is gone, the beach is going to be underneath the building. It's all going to be 8 feet. And if we knock the building down, we have to remove that fill. It's going to be at 8 feet. So either way, we're going to have a beach at 8 feet. And what the RACE consultant told us was that there's no reason that he can think of that we couldn't just engineer the beach back up to 11 feet, which is something we do all over the beach. So, we pumped sand out of the channel when we dredged. We pumped it onto Jennings Beach. We moved, there is a plan in place to engineer all of the beaches along the coast. And that was on hold for this project to get done. So that would be the plan, to bring it back up to 11 feet.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the body? Representative McDermott.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. First, I must call me Representative Gerber. Selectman Gerber. Just so maybe there's a lot of new members here, and I just wanted you to maybe, the Board of Finance approved this unanimously on their January 9th meeting. It's about 2 hours of this. If you want to learn more about the study, you'll know more about the beach elevation. You'll know more about velocities and also scouring, and it's an exciting 2 hours. So you might want to watch it, and you'll understand that full RACE presentation, because the gentleman who I think he owns RACE, Devin, gives a great explanation of all those charts that are in our backup. Just so maybe everybody understands, where is this money coming from. It's coming from debt service, and that's what was approved by the Board of Finance. And normally something like this might not even come to us.
Yeah, I guess technically it didn't have to come to the RTM, but I believe the prior first select woman, prior first select person made that promise that if there was going to be a requirement for more funds, that they would bring it back to the RTM.
Thank you. Any other questions for Representative Estorita?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Ken Astorita, District 1. Just a quick question. What's driving the 300,000 increase in decks and ramps? Is that supply chain inflation on materials?
I'd have to defer to Mr. Rauchi.
It's a product that was, you want to go? Eli, you could tell me.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It's a product
Obviously.
with Anthony and James Ryan. So we
Eli, you're breaking up a little bit.
Go ahead, Greg. Can you say it for me, Greg?
Yes, so we met with Public Works, and over the years, they've had a lot of time where maintenance-wise, they've had to paint and sand the railings and decks over and over again. So we kind of went out and got a product that just weathers well, better. It almost takes the place the product we're using, Kebney. It replaces this product, iPay. So it's going to really hold up well in the salt water atmosphere down there, and it won't need to be painted or sanded. And it's a product that's probably going to last for a good 10 plus years, maybe 20 years. I don't know the specs, but that was the major reason for the increase, was the product itself.
Okay, thanks. That makes sense.
Thank you. Any other questions? Before we go back to Representative Wolk, is there any other questions from any members that haven't had a question yet? Seeing none, Representative Wolk.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Jay Wolk, District 5. Hey, Bill, just a quick question. There is a product, mentioning decks, so part of that, because I know at our condominium, when I was president, we used a product by the name of Trex, which it's worked great with us. You don't have to paint it. It lasts for a long, long time. And is that something that you guys would be thinking of using, or this is a better product than that?
We looked at Trex, and based on the decks, the size of the decks, and the product that the architectural team came up with, this is a little bit, I think it's a better product.
Okay, thank you. I know Trex isn't cheap either.
No.
Thank you. Thanks for all you're doing too.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you. We look forward to seeing you all here next week.
Thank you.
And our last item on the agenda is regarding forming a special committee on energy initiatives. We formed this last term. We just have to reform it officially in this term. So we have Representative Keeney up in front of us just to give us a little breakout about this committee.
Hi there, John Kuhn, District 7. So the Committee on Energy Initiatives, I'll give you a little background on why this came about for those of you who are new. I guess it would have been roughly 14 months ago or so, UI came out with its outrageous rate increases, and I thought, Jesus, there must be something we can do about this, right? And my first foray was to try and get creative in solving the problem. And I thought, I contacted a few people on the RTM. I talked about such things as, can we use the Blake Code? Can we use air rights to, in some way impact UI and claim some money back? Turns out the Blake Code is written pretty tightly, so that wasn't going to work. Air rights was another thing that probably wasn't going to work. And I kept talking with people, and Representative McCabe introduced me to, okay, Mike, she introduced me to a gentleman on a call who introduced me, and I think some of the other people on the call, to a concept called community energy aggregation. And so, short story, what community energy aggregation is in states that have a deregulated utility environment, such as Connecticut, there is the ability to have the town act as the purchaser for all of its resident utility users. Now, it needs state level enabling legislation in order for the towns to go through with that. And there are, I think, 14 states in the union right now. Massachusetts was the first. The most recent is New Hampshire. And there are a variety of different types of this program. But it basically serves to act as the purchaser for all of the utility residents. And we already do this with the municipality, right? So our municipal buildings go through a consultant who purchases our utility needs, significant savings to the town. So I thought, well, let's try and get a committee together to do something like this. And as I went through the process and talked to the variety of people, I found out that this committee is actually unique in that it is the only legislative body to have a committee such as this, at least in the state, for what people were telling me. And these are not the friends of mine that I'm talking about, that these are people who I've talked about various energy issues, and they've said, you're the only one. And I think there's probably some people out here who are going to say, well, what about Sustainable Fairfield? Great, they're partners with us. We had, I think, 3 meetings of the committee last year. One of them was a meeting just with them, and we had a great session. They loved the existence of this committee. We love the existence of them. So what I'm hoping to do is continue the work of this committee. We had about 3 meetings, as I say. Peter Britton was the vice chair on the committee. Michelle McCabe was the secretary. Jeff Steele was also on the committee. And I cannot remember who the last person was. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Gerber. Yeah, I forgot about him. He's kind of forgettable. So, sorry, Bill. So I just wanted to give you that overview before you guys vote on the $10 million of funding for the salaries of the committee.
Thank you, Representative Kuhn. Does anyone have any questions? Representative Estrada.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Ken Astrida, District 1. Just a quick question. Do you have a time frame when you think you'd be ready to come to the body or to the town with whatever proposal you guys are? Do you have a time frame?
Well, there's a few different ones. Sorry, I didn't even get into. There's one of them, I think, Jeff being here earlier, Mr. Galdanzi, he and I talked very briefly, but I've learned a lot about things like network geothermal, which might be a way to tackle the HVAC needs of our schools maybe it's a little more expensive up front, but there are a whole lot of incentive programs and whatnot, but the cost of operating them is much lower than your typical program. So when I think about the community energy aggregation, I don't know the timing on that because, again, that needs a state level enabling legislation. But I think there's all sorts of things. I think the next step we would probably do is we'd look at a town inventory of some of what our energy assets are. I got a request from the new first selectman to look at solar at Smith Richardson, heat pumps, microgrids, fuel cells. There's a whole host of things. I think that we have a town that is willing to do things, but sometimes, just like everybody, right? You get caught up in your day job. You can't necessarily look at an alternative technology. So we'd like to be the possibility of helping with that sort of thing. In Massachusetts, in Framingham, there's this pilot program for network geothermal sort of thing I was mentioning before, and Eversource is paying for that for Framingham. They're doing it by everybody across the state is paying a little extra in their utility bills to fund that. So I would love to get us to be at the point where maybe we're kind of at the forefront of utilities and whatnot. We have to partner with utilities in a lot of these things, but we want to be at the forefront when people are thinking of new programs and that sort of thing. I spoke with West Hartford. They have a town energy manager. Now, we might want to employ somebody kind of like that as well. She ran me through some of the savings that they had gotten. Some of it's low-hanging fruit, and we've probably done a lot of it, but there may be, maybe we want to employ somebody like that on a part-time basis, which is what West Hartford has. So there's a lot of different possibilities. And I don't think I could really set in stone right now what the specific agenda is to deliver specific programs.
Just one more question. You said unenabling legislation from the state. Is that specific to just like for the town of Fairfield, or is that for like every town in the state if it wants to take advantage of that?
That's state level enabling legislation. So the state has to say, okay, we will allow for community energy aggregation to happen. And then the towns have to set it up on their own.
Okay.
Thank you, Representative Steele.
Thank you, Jeff Steele, District 3. John, we've talked about this. I think this is a great initiative. I think it's important. Was there a description still of sort of a charter of what you're trying to accomplish? And I think it's part of that question. It is what is the goal? What is the end goal of what this committee would try to do? I think that's important.
It was added to the backup today. Sorry. It was.
Yes, it'll be posted in the backup.
There's just it's a little blurb that Representative Kuhn wrote up, and it was just added today.
Okay. As well, we'll have to appoint members to that through the Special Legislative Management Committee too.
Yeah, once we form it.
One other idea to think about too is community solar. That could be a whole world of.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't put that on my list because one of the guys that we spoke with is a big proponent of that. So yeah.
Community solar is, it can be a 1 to 10 megawatt project where individuals don't want to buy the electricity from United Illuminating. They buy it from the solar grid, basically. And it's through a PPA, power purchasing agreement. So there's an investor who buys the essentially solar farm, builds it, and that power is renewable power sold to individuals, someone who can't put one in their yard or on their house, and they can essentially buy their electricity that way, probably at a better rate. And so everyone then purchases and uses renewable electricity, renewable solar. And it's a quickly growing and emerging world right now in the U.S. in terms of community solar. They're popping up all over.
Yeah, and I think your point about it being, the quickness of these things popping up. I think with the whole, what was it, the IRA, there are funds available for a lot of different things. So I want to retain the ability to be nimble in what we go after. The community energy aggregation is kind of my holy grail. And I hope we can deliver that, but I don't think we should let that get in the way of delivering on some things like maybe community solar.
Thank you, Representative McCabe.
Representative McCabe, District 4. It was a pleasure to serve with John Kuhn on this committee last year. And I want to emphasize that it's really important that we have it. What we discovered, especially not just in the conversations with experts and practitioners from around the state, but also with Sustainable Fairfield, is to have a legislative body be a key partner in the work is important because some of the initiatives are going to require some form of ordinance or some partnership with municipal government. And I think it was very clear in that meeting that there was a lot of very complementary conversations happening, and there was absolutely a role for an RTM committee to play. And I would encourage the body to not feel the necessity of putting a time frame on this, because addressing high energy costs, addressing renewable energy it's not a short-term game, and it's always evolving. And I imagine that there's going to be a need for this committee for quite some time. And I don't think that we should feel compelled to say, well, the work has to be done in a year or whatever it might be. I think this is going to be something that's going to require us to be paying attention to it for many years to come. And I thank you, Representative Kuhn, for your leadership in this because I think it's really important and I'm glad that we're going to be continuing the work.
Thank you. Representative Britton.
Peter Britton, District 1. Did you want to speak to how we're actually looking for new members?
Oh, right, that. Well, as you know, one member has left us. Peter has mentioned to me he'd like to stay on. Michelle, I'm not certain of. I'll leave that alone for now. And Jeff was a member, but I don't know if he is still interested or he's got too much on his plate. So we had been 5 members, and that's probably the right number. But if there's overwhelming interest, maybe. Yeah.
Let your caucus leaders know if you want to be on this so that they can populate it at SLMC.
Yeah, and if the numbers are bigger, we're going to have to come back for more funding.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Representative Kuhn. That's the end. We're going to break up into committees. Chairs, make sure you record the meeting. And anyone online, make sure you call in using the phone numbers at the bottom of the agenda. Thank you. See you all next week.